Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
What a save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rui Diaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Niko leaves absolutely no doubt. The Sounders rule the region. Seattle Sounders is campeón. It's gone! It's gone! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Nice work on your little yacht thing.
And Portland can't say shit.
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder at Heart wrote a commentary that we didn't take Overcome seriously.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes on the Sounder at Heart podcast network. It is Friday. Well, I should say I'm Jeremiah O'Shan. It's Friday, and we have a special episode of What We Learned This Week, because not only is Niko Moreno here, but so is Tim Foss, two of my Sounder at Heart colleagues. Welcome to the show, guys.
Happy to be here. Happy Friday.
Thank you for joining us, Tim. It's always exciting to have you on. You always got the great takes. You were at every press conference, actually, one of the few people that was actually able to ask questions to the coaches. So I'm excited to hear what you got to say about, first of all, that dynamic, and then, of course, what you heard from coaches specifically to this game. But, yeah, man, this was it's a cool week, man. I mean, it is a cool week. I got to tell you that I've kind of been moved around between being really exhausted and really excited, but the games have been incredible. Actually, just about every game in the Club World Cup has been really, really good, with the exception of a few. So, man, this tournament, starting to grow on me a little bit. I'm not gonna lie to you.
That has been maybe the biggest surprise, and I guess maybe it's a good way to just start out wide, and we'll dig into the Sounders specifically. But this tournament as a whole, I think, came in with a lot of skepticism, especially among people who are, fans of the European game. I think in general, there's a lot of frustration with FIFA. This was largely seen as a money grab tournament. I think a lot of the reality is that a lot of the attention before the tournament was about how no one wanted to pay for it in terms of broadcast rights. And then how the money was getting distributed. Obviously, a lot of the coverage on Sounder at Heart has been about the fight with the players over their cut of the winnings. And I don't think there was as much attention paid to the reality that this was the first time we were going to see a bunch of teams from different parts of the world taking each other on in a real competition with real stakes. Say what you will about the value of the trophy itself, but there's real money on the line. And as a result, I would say we've seen mostly competitive games, certainly games where the teams seem plugged in. There was the 10-0 Bayern win over Auckland City. I don't think that's totally unexpected. This is a semi-pro team lining up against one of the 5 best teams in the world. The result was the result, right? But other than that game, mostly competitive matches. I guess Juventus got a big win too. So that was one other one that was pretty lopsided, but certainly in the Sounders games, there have been very good games. They have been competitive. They have been, high quality for the most part. And I guess just want to get your take. We'll start with you, Tim. What has been your impression of this tournament in general?
Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Having only really watched
Sounders games through the tournament, but
Yeah.
you know, seeing clips from other games and hearing from other people, FIFA have a nasty little way of weaseling their way from doing objectionable things to getting good product onto the field. I think, you know, the Qatar World Cup was largely seen as a bit of a boondoggle going in, and then was one of the best World Cups we've had in a while for a number of reasons. This World Cup, there was a lot of consternation coming in from, you know, the teams and players in Europe talking about players being asked to play too much. You know, there are guys who are going to basically play for like 18 months straight and they'll have played 70 games in a calendar year or whatever. It is a lot to ask. But when you get the best teams from everywhere in the world all together on, you know, broadly pretty good surfaces and pretty good conditions, you end up with good football to watch. Like, especially if you add enough cash incentive for teams to take it seriously, they take it pretty seriously. Like, we'll get into it more, but Diego Simeone certainly didn't just not want to lose. He wanted to win, and he wanted to win bad. Like, these teams take it very seriously, and the result has been good.
Niko, I imagine you have consumed a little bit more of this tournament than either Tim or I. What's been your impression?
Man, I've loved every game that I've watched, and my approach to this tournament specifically had a lot of mixed emotions, because I grew up loving the Club World Cup, even as it was before, simply because it gave South American teams a chance to battle the best of Europe. And if you're a South American, we don't hate, but we have this like competitiveness about the European. I would feel like they created the sport, but we perfected it. That's the way we say it in South America. Or we're the flair, we're the best players in the planet. We have the 5-time World Club champions, all of these things. So there's always this competition with Europe. So anytime that tournament kind of happened, you were stuck in front of your TV. You wanted to watch it. I was skeptical about this one, particularly because of the new format, because I didn't really know if teams are going to take it seriously, because of everything that FIFA kind of embodies at times. But now that I've been able to watch the games, man, it's been top class, and they've been fun games, man. I watched the Benfica Boca Juniors game, and it was a fantastic match, back and forth. I mean, Benfica is a quality team that maybe it's not like your Porto, and maybe it's not your, I don't know, Dortmund or Bayern, but they're a top team, man. And that game was such a quality just performance from both squads. Looking back at the Fluminense game against Dortmund, I mean, that was a 0-0 game, but I could argue that Flamengo was the much better team in that. Fluminense was the much better team against Dortmund, and you get to see certain players that maybe no one has really watched on the bigger stratosphere. So, man, all of these games to me have just been so cool to just compare game styles. The European game is very direct. It's very simplistic. It's all about being extremely effective with your ball possession. When the South American game, and I think anybody who saw the Botafogo game and the Atletico game can say the Botafogo game was a lot slower. They wanted to get on the ball a little bit more. And Atletico was just like, go, 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 right? It's a quick transition moment. So all of those things have really embodied this globalness of soccer culture that I just find so captivating. But going back to just the product on the field, I felt like every single game that I've watched has been competitive. The Monterrey Inter Milan game, that was another one that I was not expecting Monterrey to go out there and really give it to Inter Milan the way they did. And this was not an Inter Milan that was taking this tournament lightly. I mean, they had a full-on squad of some of their best players, right? I mean, Lautaro, Augusto, Darmian. I mean, some of the players that you were expecting to kind of shine in this one. And it was battle. So I love it. I will try to just concise it there and conclude it that I've been very impressed by the way that the teams have approached this tournament. And I feel like this is step one to maybe the next go around of this tournament is going to be so much more marketed. It's going to be so much more known. People are really going to go to it. So I feel like it's going to be even better the next time around.
That is a fascinating point about it. I do think this has room to grow. I think we could probably pick out some things that we would like to see better, and we'll probably get into that today. One other thing, I think that it's notable that it wasn't the Sounders, which, we're always bummed when the Sounders aren't first to do something, but that Inter Miami got that win over Porto sort of, I think, in a lot of ways legitimizes the sort of the worldiness, or also in the same way that Botafogo being PSG, that this is not a tournament as so far that has just been dominated by European powers. It's been a tournament that has seen a pretty good mix of results coming from different teams. It's been, like I said, it's been competitive almost in every game. And, Miami has been, I think they've actually shown well. I think MLS comes out of this tournament so far looking like they belong in this tournament. And I think providing a lot of the value proposition of why they even bother doing this. I don't know. Did you watch much of the Porto Miami game, Niko?
I did. And that was another one that was very good because Inter Miami went out there, as maybe most people expected, to really give it to Porto, and they created a bunch of chances. I thought Luis Suarez could have had a couple there in the first half, but on the other side, Stuani was big for them as well, because when Porto got ahead and they were the steamroller, there were lapses of the game where it was all Porto, lapses of the game where it was all Inter Miami, it all goes back to the Messi factor at the end that they're very reliant on, because that's who puts away that free kick that kind of gives it away. But all in all, man, I thought it was an excellent game. And I really think that anyone who was watching that game, regardless of the big names like Busquets and the Fantastic Four. If you go back and you look at that game, the Kromaskis were top notch. Segovia, that first goal is phenomenal, right? Falcone, he saves one right on the line with his head that had a shot that had beat Stuani. So man, I thought it was really impressive to see Miami just get out there and just play them head to head, right? We're not going to bunker. We're not going to worry about this, that, or the other. We're just going to put a lot of guys forward. We're going to get on the front foot. And yeah, man, they deserve that win from the beginning.
Yeah, and right now it looks like right now they're in position to get out of the group. And I believe Miami would have, all they need to do is get a tie in their last game against Porto, and they would secure advancement. And I guess so, which would potentially knock out Porto, which is pretty crazy. This is, and so right now we're, I think Botafogo I think they are going to win the group, right? They're on 6. I guess Paris Saint-Germain, they could still win the group. Okay. But Botafogo secured advancement out of the group. And so that, I don't think a lot of people would have necessarily predicted that. And then you can kind of just go down the list, these are just all very competitive games right now. Competitive, at least in the two groups that we've had 2 games across the board, it's been about as competitive as you can say. Now, we're only halfway through the tournament at this point. We're not even halfway through the tournament, or halfway through the group stages, I'd say. But it's been, like I said, it's been pretty good. The one thing, and I would even say the crowds haven't been great, but they've been, I would say, about what you could reasonably expect. I don't know that there is a world where you can manufacture interest in Auckland City Benfica, for instance. I don't know, not to denigrate Benfica, but they don't have a huge following outside of Portugal, I don't think. It's going to be tough to manufacture, a big game when you've got teams that just don't have worldwide followings in the attendances. like the Sundowns which actually won, which is kind of funny because they won their first game, admittedly against Ulsan. But like, I don't know if there's a world where you can put a South African team against any non-big club and think, all right, that's going to draw a big crowd. But in Seattle, I think I've been really happy with the crowd so far. You know, there was 30,000 plus in the first game when it was very lively 30,000. I think that was maybe more important is that there were a lot of people here, or the people that were here were very engaged. And then for this last game, they announced it at almost 52,000. And that might be a little inflated, but I don't know. I've seen the shots of the crowd, and from where we were sitting, it looked very full. I've seen shots of the crowd from various places in the stadium, again, during the game, not before kickoff. And it was the best Sounders crowd we've had since probably the Champions League final, right? And then even at I went to the Irwa River game, there was only about 12,000 people there, but that was as loud as I've heard Lumen Field in a long time. And certainly the peaks were not as high as the peaks at a Sounders game, but the consistent noise from minute 1 to minute 90 was like almost ear ringing. I mean, it was just constant. It was very impressive. I loved the Irwa supporters especially, but River Plate came out in good numbers. Like there was, I don't think there was a lot of neutrals there, but the people that were there to see River and to see Irwa were super into it. And so I don't know. I think there is a lot of fair second guessing of FIFA's ticketing policy. I think we could we've detailed that a lot on the show. I think that stands up. I think that they fucked up by not only pricing it the way they did, but releasing the tickets in the manner they did, which was releasing the worst tickets first, which is still to me like a mind-bogglingly dumb way of like building anticipation for something, is to like let people have the worst seats for, I don't know, it's very strange. But despite all that, you go to the game and it feels like a big event. I think that's the thing that has struck me so much is once you're in the stadium, once you're sort of like in the environment, it feels like a big deal. And I think FIFA does deserve credit for, the way they set up the stadiums, the way that they, let's talk about the grass, which is easy. It's one of those things where you can poo-poo the importance of the surface, but we spend a lot of time talking about it. But I do think it's actually very indicative of the approach to this thing, is that at least in Seattle, where we have a lot of experience with temporary grass pitches that have mostly been substandard, every single person I've talked to, on the record, off the record, nope, the pitch is great. Why can't we do this all the time? That's basically the response that we get. It has helped. We're now 3 games into the grass. It looked great by the end of the Atletico match. It looked great at the beginning of the Botafogo match, and it stayed consistent. Tim or Niko, whichever one of you want to weigh in this, what have been in your impression, sort of like globally, about the atmosphere and the and I guess really technically specifically the grass?
I want to hear from Tim, because I think that they asked Brian something about Simeone thinking that it wasn't that it was a bit slow or something like that. Did I hear that correctly?
I don't remember the exact question, but I think it was about Atleti walking out on the field before the game, maybe the day before or something, and that the players described it as like hard and slow or something. And Schmetzer's response was like, my players think it's great. So I don't, whatever. And I like, maybe the Atleti team, who are accustomed to playing on pristine pitches in Spain, where they're not really sharing fields with another sport the way that some of, almost any grass pitch in the US, lots of teams elsewhere where they also host NFL or they play rugby on that field as well. Like they just may be accustomed to a different type of grass pitch, but they certainly didn't seem hampered by it yesterday. So I don't know. The grass has looked great. It would be so nice to be able to have good grass all the time in Seattle to play on. I think people are aware you can get good other grass in Seattle all the time. But the atmosphere has been great. I think broadly throughout the tournament, certainly there have been games that, to your point, Jeremiah, there are just certain games that are tough to draw a real crowd, especially if the pricing is, I mean, even with dropping prices, it's not quite the same as like being able to, decide on your lunch break, you're going to pick up tickets to go catch an afternoon baseball game. Like, you're still having to drop a not insignificant amount of money to catch one of these noon or 3 p.m. games, whatever. But for the games you would expect good crowds, the crowds have been good and they've been into it. And I don't know what more you could want. It has been a good advertisement for the sport.
Yeah, I think that looking back at other grass fields that we've had at Lumen Field or the one other couple times, this is completely different. You could tell that the way they laid it way earlier than they ever have for any sort of tournament has made a huge difference. Every single player that I've talked to has told me that they cannot tell the difference from a real grass pitch. I had some tell me that, in South America, we're playing in something that's a lot worse than this. So, it really is a praise to the way they set this up. I got to get on it for a couple of seconds after the Botafogo game, and yeah, I mean, it feels great. It feels just like the grass field at Long Acres or the clubhouse for the Sounders. So it's a quality field.
And I think one of the things that is the big difference here is that when the Sounders have laid the grass before, it's sort of as out of they've been forced to do it essentially. It's either been for friendlies or it's been international matches where there's not necessarily a lot of oversight. It's basically do the best you can for as cheap as you can, I think, is probably the general attitude that is taken when putting down a grass pitch. It's usually put down maybe a week at most before the games are being played. Oftentimes only even a few days before the games are being played. And there's not really a quality control aspect to it. When we had the Copa America Centenario in 2016, I want to say that was maybe the best that they had, but it was not very good. And by the end of the Seattle hosted, I think, 3 matches in that one.
Yes.
And by the end of it, it was looking really, really ragged. And what I think the difference this time is that you have FIFA is taking a lot of care in both the installation and the maintenance of it. After every game, we see them mowing the lawn and we see them replacing the divots and we see them looking for any little, even one of the things that struck me in this last game, Danny Masovsky went in for a slide tackle sort of in the southwest corner and he took up a pretty big chunk of grass. And it must have been, I guess that must have been in the first half. But at halftime, someone came out and they repaired it. Like, this is the kind of care that I think oftentimes gets lost when you are doing this kind of installation where it's like you put it down and then you water it and you sort of hope for the best. You're not sitting there maintaining it. And it's being meticulously maintained. I actually exchanged some emails with the guy who is in control of the FIFA pitch management. And he told me that so far the pitch at Lumen Field is performing at what he called optimum standards, meaning like it's like basically what they measure is like when you bounce a ball off of it, how does it rebound? How does it feel to your feet? And so it's performing like exactly how they would, hope that it would perform. And this is a little different than what they're going to do next year, which we've talked about a lot, where they're going to actually rip up the whole surface and they're going to plant real grass and it's going to be embedded. But man, I can't help but feel like if we wanted to do this on a more regular basis, we could, if we just were willing to spend the money. And it does I really do think it makes a difference. Like, it looks It looks spectacular. It looks really, really nice on TV. It looks great in person. I do appreciate that you can see the artificial turf sort of in the end zones, and it looks like shit. Like relatively speaking to what we're seeing everywhere else. And I'm someone who is sort of like, I get defensive a little bit about the field turf here. I think it gets sometimes a bad rap, but that's only because we oftentimes compare it to the best of the best. And I do think that the field turf is like the Sounders field turf is better than a lot of poorly maintained grass pitches. And that's the reality. A lot of pitches are poorly maintained, but man, when you put the care in, it does make a difference.
No, it has made a difference. And I believe that it's also helped the product on the field, right? The ability for players to perform, the passing, the shooting, the dribbling, all this. And we haven't seen people slid all around. I mean, it's been good. And that's the sort of thing that really takes a tournament to the next level. And if anything, you got to give FIFA a lot of credit for that.
Yeah. I think one of the other things that anecdotally seems to be the case is that FIFA is treating this like a real warm up for the World Cup next year. And that's partly because this is a venue for the World Cup. And so they're bringing in various technologies, and they're trying out stuff, like we're having to go through turnstiles, which is something that we don't normally do at Lumen Field. They have all this fencing around, and they're doing all these kind of things. But I haven't heard many complaints about people struggling to get in on time. I haven't heard any complaints about, there's a lot of police presence, and especially right now that feels overwhelming. Although that seemed much more I was much more struck by it at the Irwa game. Like I was shocked at how much and I'm like just uniformed police just sitting in the patrolling everywhere. And I think that's sort of a world that's more of a FIFA thing than it is a current political climate situation. But it's off-putting. I get it. I found it a little jarring myself. But other than that, it has actually made, I did not expect this to be the case. It's actually made me more excited for the World Cup next year, because it makes me feel like this is going to feel like something different. And I think that's the thing that's struck me the most, is that this just it doesn't feel like a circus that kind of just traveled into town and is going to disappear, even though that is what it is. It just feels like a big event. It feels much more like, to give an example, like when Cirque du Soleil comes to town and they sort of set up their own venue, and you're in your own little world there. And I don't know. I guess that's Tim. I think you and I have probably talked about how in the last year, our excitement about being involved in the World Cup has diminished, because it's just been one negative story after another. I think the political climate, understandably, has contributed to that. I'm not sitting here saying I am as enthused as I was when the venues got announced, but I will say that I find myself more interested and more optimistic about what this event might feel like, at least when you're in the stadium.
Yeah, I think I would compare it pretty, I think, favorably to the experience of, I didn't go to the actual game, but when MLB brought the All-Star game to Seattle, the vibe of going to the Fan Fest for that feels pretty similar, where it is sort of like this elevated event with a heavy emphasis on the spectacle of all of it. I think they've tried some things that to me don't really seem to work, like what's been described as NBA style walkout and player announcements before the games that just feels like a sort of awkward lull that with a small tweak could be a bit better. Like if the person announcing sped it up and brought a little bit more energy, and then the players jogged out, but instead it's like a leisurely stroll from the tunnel one every 15 or 20 seconds at a time. And
it's a little awkward, a little long.
It is a little bit goofy. Every icon looks like a meme coin that you could buy. Some of the stuff is a little chintzy, but on the whole, aside from, I mean, we get spoiled a little bit, but having to pay what feel like stadium prices for food in the press box feels like it sucks a little bit, but it is still like slightly elevated food from usual. Like everything has this event feel to it that I think, especially if they can take away some good learnings about like, oh, maybe if you don't immediately price people out, you will have better attendance. If they can apply that to the World Cup next summer, like some of those things, but it does provide a sense of optimism for what the overall experience could be next summer.
Yeah, the dress rehearsal thing is something that's very real, and you guys have already said it all, so I'll be concise. But I think most importantly is that they are kind of figuring out this couple of wrinkles that I think will get ironed out. There's clearly going to be a lot more demand because if there's something that has been true always, is that when you're talking about a World Cup and a nation, obviously just the popularity just increases, right? When you're talking about clubs, you're talking about groups within a nation. When you talk about a national team, it's everybody coming out. I mean, I've seen Mexico-China filled up, ad lumen filled before. Mexico-China. I mean, it wasn't like, all this star power. It was just two nations, and it was full. So I expect that to be the case. And man, when it comes to our side of the business, then we're not going to bore the audience with it, but it's been weird. It's been odd, but I guess for us, it's also a learning experience of what we might have to encounter for the World Cup next year.
It has been kind of funny on our, like, I haven't talked as much about it because I don't know how much people care, and I don't know how much there are annoyances, like the way that we are sort of herded around Lumen Field is much more just much more direct. Like we don't have as much freedom to go where we want. There's a lot more kind of hoops that we have to step through. One of, Noah, who is one of our, I'm not going to get into the details of this, but Noah, who's one of our, I mean, you probably know from Lobbing Scorchers, he's been kind of jerked around a bit about, his credentials. I had a snafu where originally they weren't going to let us, actually all of us, I think, had this experience where they weren't originally going to let us into the press box, and they had to fix some stuff. So there are things that need to be ironed out. It's not perfect right now. It's just, I think the overall sense I get is I'm going to kind of miss this. Like there is going to be like a letdown factor of when this is over. It's going to be like, we're just going back to regular old MLS games. And it makes me excited about potentially making it does make me want to make another, Club World Cup. Like I hope the Sounders qualify again. Like it's not, I'm definitely not coming away from this feeling, well, that's what it was, and I think it helps that the Sounders have been competitive, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back and we're going to dig into actually what we learned from the Sounders. I don't know, maybe that's the more interesting stuff for our listeners, but I did think getting some of these high level things was important. But yeah, you're listening to Nos Arietes.
Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes Nos Arietes, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. We've been independent since August of 2023, but need your support to make sure it continues. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible by your continued support. Memberships start as low as $25 a year, which not only helps make podcasts like this one happen, but also gets you access to everything we produce. If you're able to support us at higher levels, starting at $75 a year, you gain access to a host of other perks, most notably entry into our members-only Discord, where the smartest, funniest, and most engaged commenters share their thoughts and ideas. To find out more, just visit sounderatheart.com and click the subscribe button in the top right corner. Thanks for listening.
Nos Arietes, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes, but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Hacks and Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Hacks and Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at haxanferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code SOUNDERATHEART, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to haxanferments.com, use the code SOUNDERATHEART at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Hacks and Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart podcast network. Sounder at Heart's Club World Cup coverage is being sponsored by realtor Moreno. Yes, that's my sister. With 20 plus years in marketing, business, and negotiation, and an MBA from UW, Moreno helps homebuyers and investors make smart, informed real estate decisions. From first homes to 1031 exchanges and developmental deals, she offers expert guidance backed by financial insight and local market knowledge. Expertise in new construction and well-versed on all types of real estate, she'd like to talk to you about your goals and is here to help you move forward with confidence. While I'm obviously not an impartial observer, I can tell you that I have referred both friends and family to Marnie, and she's helped them get what they were looking for at prices they wanted to pay. You can reach her at marnieoshanhomes.com. That's MarnieOshanHomes.com, or email her at marnie@windermere.com. Welcome back to Nos Arietes on the Sounder Heart Podcast Network. So we are gonna talk about the Sounders and some of what we learned about the Sounders. So Niko, let's start with some of these big picture things. Sounders have played 2 games. They've played 2 games against 2 very good teams. I think that the Atletico speaks for itself. This is one of the best teams. This is a top 20 team in the world. I think Botafogo, there was a little bit more question about how good is this team really? Well, I think we found out how good they were. They beat PSG yesterday 1-0. They clearly are no slouches either. Just like kind of broadly speaking, what do you think we've learned about the Sounders in these 2 games?
I think that we've learned that they can compete. And look, I thought I was a little, and we'll get into it, but I thought I was a little bit harsh on them in the post-game show after the Atletico game. But the reason why I was a little bit harsh is because I kind of felt like the goals they give up were so easy and just fundamentally off, right? It's a set piece. It's a guy that's unmarked at the top of the box. All of these things, even against Botafogo, it was kind of the same thing. There is a ill-advised and naive, terrible decision by Nuhu on top of the corner of the box. It sets up a set piece that ends up in Jair Cunha header into the goal. It kind of takes the wind of the sails of a Sounders team that had got on off to a good start. So when it comes to what was similar or some of those things that they'll continue to be an issue for the Sounders, I feel like in both games, they were in them. I mean, they competed, right? And it was courageous against Atletico. It was believing that they belong against Botafogo. And that's kind of the takeaway I got out of it. The main issue continues to be an ability to finish in front of goal. And that's another one that just carries over. And so when we're talking about the broad aspect of it, that's a big one. There's always going to be that, what if the team had been healthy? What if Jordan Morris was in full shape and ready to go in full form? What if Yammer Gomez-Andrade had been there for that first game, where his game is literally what kind of killed us against Botafogo, those aerial duels, the physicality, someone that can chase down Igor de Jesus all over. Igor de Jesus, that, by the way, he was the one that gave it to PSG, and he's the one that puts that goal away because he's that good. So having a guy like Yammer would be very interesting just to see how they would really match up, right? So if I have to put both games into this vacuum and come up with the conclusions, I'd say that people should be encouraged. And I know that nobody wants to hear that because in soccer, moral victories, or in sports, moral victories don't really exist. And it's kind of tough to really look at it that way. And they're going to think we're being apologetic. But moving on for the rest of the year, I do feel like this is going to boost up the team's confidence. It's going to let Brian kind of put in his notebook some of the guys that have performed, some that haven't, maybe use this as a way to get right for Leagues Cup, get right for MLS play. But all in all, at the end of the day, the main conclusion is that Seattle competed. And I think that's what we all had as the standard for this Club World Cup. I don't think none of us were expecting them to get out of the group of death against, clubs that have one player that's worth the entirety of your roster, like Julian Alvarez.
Julian Alvarez is worth twice what the Sounders' whole roster is worth. Like, that's a real, I mean, I don't know if it's real. It's a transfer mark, but that's a real perception. Like, these are the Atletico budget, or the Atletico valuation is like 10 times that of the Sounders. That's what the metrics say. But sorry, I had to cut you off.
No, that was kind of it, because I wanted to hear from you guys as well. But I did have mixed feelings, and I'll be very frank about it, because in one hand I had, Seattle is showing to the world and all the people that said that the Sounders were going to take 10 and 7 and 11 goals, that wasn't quite it. And we never thought that was going to be the case, but we always thought we were going to compete. But now it's there. They competed, and not they just competed, but they could have won, specifically the Botafogo game, right? And then on the other hand, you have that exact same thought process, and you're like, man, I mean, did we really miss a chance to maybe get a draw against Botafogo? What if Pedro and Paul come in a little bit earlier? What if you put away a couple of those chances? What if we were healthy? All those things kind of come to mind. So there's a lot of mixed feelings, but overall, I feel like encourage should be the word that we all come out after these two games.
Yeah, I think your point that there aren't moral victories is correct. Like, the Sounders certainly are not going to, I mean, they kind of have to some extent pumped their chest about, the only MLS team to score in 2 separate Club World Cup games, but they're not, like, no one from the actual club is going to tell you that by losing 2 of 2 games, they succeeded on they accomplished their goals. But in the Club World Cup, in a group of death where you're facing one of the top 3 Spanish teams, a Copa Libertadores and Serie A champion, and the UEFA Champions League winners, perennial
the best team in the world
in France, the pretty arguably best team in the world by some margin. If you can hang tough, that's like, there is a moral victory there, especially when you start layering on the caveats of like, okay, well, you had to start your third choice center back on a gimpy leg, and in that first one, who
you're cooking,
him being injured kind of like results in both of the goals to a certain extent. The fourth choice center back comes in against Atletico Madrid, and you still only gave up 3 goals. Like, there were chances for a lot more, but there were chances for the Sounders to score a lot more than 1 goal in either of those games. Like, Diego Simeone got asked first by some very condescending and rude Spanish reporters in the post game about the Sounders, and then by our friend and colleague Masvidal about the Sounders, and did not seem to be just blowing smoke up Seattle's ass. Like, he was very complimentary, speaking about Stefan Fry, that it wasn't just that Atleti blew chances. Stefan Fry did a lot to keep them from scoring more than 1 goal in the first half. He was very complimentary about, the Maz asked what his team speech was at halftime, and his response was basically like, I told them to stay calm, because if they lose their heads, this is the team that can and will hurt us, that we were lucky that they didn't in the first half, and we just kept playing our game. We knew we had a chance to win, but we couldn't throw it away, because this is a team that is capable of hurting you if you leave too much space behind. Like, no other team has treated like the Sounders were a pushover And the Sounders have proven themselves to not be. Like, yeah, it doesn't feel good to lose 2-1 and 3-1 in games where you had a chance to take something from them. But it's also, like, in the context, it's not a bad result. I certainly haven't left any of the games feeling like I'm going to lose sleep about what happened. Like, I think there's a lot of positives that the team can take from these 3 games. I think the PSG game should be interesting because PSG needs to win. I might download the DAZN app to watch Botafogo and Atleti because that game is going to rock. Like, I think if nothing else, the Sounders have played pretty well, and I have a newfound appreciation for a few different teams. Like, I don't know.
I will also piggyback a little bit on what Niko said there, is that the feeling I can't shake to the degree that I wouldn't say I'm losing sleep over this, but I can't shake this feeling that it would have been really nice to see the Sounders a little closer to full strength than we saw them, because it did, especially in the Botafogo game, it felt like either Yeimar or Jordan Morris potentially makes a difference in that one. I think especially and I think you can talk yourself into Yeimar making a big difference in the second game too. Maybe both of them really making a big difference, because for all the chances that Botafogo created, I think the one that kills me the most, well, there's 2 of them that really kill me. The first goal, what are you going to do? Like, he bangs that in from the edge of the penalty area off the underside of the crossbar. There's not a lot, maybe you close them out a little faster, right? But the second goal is off of a similar play. And what's frustrating is that there's no one like the Sounders just watched after that came off. Like, Steph did a good job to bang the ball off the crossbar. It looks like he's going to maybe be able to get it. It turns out the ball was a little farther out from him than I think it looked from our angle. But the other angles made it look like, okay, he didn't really have a great shot at grabbing that off the crossbar. But what kills me is no one was there picking up Wetzel in the box. He's just sitting all alone in front of the easiest finish. I mean, it was like a 0.99 XG chance. You don't see that very often. He didn't miss. But you just can't allow that sort of opportunity. And I think that's the thing that kills me about that chance is the defense seemed to kind of shut off. And then similarly on the last goal was a similar situation where it was just a throw in that John Bell doesn't get a great clearance on, and then no one's able to sort of close in. And I think watching the replay, what was frustrating is that there's no one no one is picking up that side. Like, there's no right back on the outside of Bell to pick up the ball if it goes past him. Or I should say Kalani was there, but there needed to be there. He was a little too far in, and then there's no right winger. I think honestly, like, it kills me. I think Paul may have lost his mark there, because that's who looked like was marking Barrios in the buildup, and he just seems to have totally lost him. So it's just a little frustrating that there was some miscommunication, that there was just some like lax defending, and then the chances that they had, both Musovski. I'm not gonna beat up Danny Musovski, because the reality is that he's doing the job that he's being paid to do. But he got 2 great chances in this game. He put them both on frame, so you can't get too mad. But you also can't help but be like, God, you'd like to finish those. You'd like, and then the Ferreira goal that got waved off. I feel like Ferreira probably could have kept himself on side and still gotten that same chance. And I don't know if that's on him. Georgie's making sort of like a little slalomy run, and sometimes those are hard to stay on side with, because it's like the line is moving and it's you get caught. And so I don't want to beat up Ferreira too much, but I do think a little more, a little bit more awareness of his surroundings. He's on side and he's no less open if he's onside than when he was offside. So that was, those are all things that we're even talking about these things, I think is a positive, though, because it so shows how fine the margins really were in these games. And I think Atletico absolutely showed their class. I think Atletico especially I think we saw exactly why this is such a good team. Like, Julian Alvarez is an unbelievable player. That volley that he hits off the crossbar is nothing. That it came from nothing. And it's just like, the chance that he has where he shoots it wide, a great chance from them. their forward. I'm blanking on his name, the Norwegian guy. He got himself like
Alex Sorloth. Yeah.
Sorloth. He got himself into like unbelievable positions. It was kind of shocking he didn't score a goal, but I think that speaks somewhat to the defense.
And that's
but
a 20-goal scorer in La Liga.
Exactly.
That's a 20-goal scorer in La Liga. That he was behind Julian Alvarez the last season. I mean, the guy is a physical specimen, by the way. I mean, the guy is huge.
Dolph Lundgren in Rocky 3 is what I thought he looked like.
Man, incredible. And to both of you guys' points, I talked to the players, and you're going to be able to find these both on Pulso Sports. Koke, he was like, I was surprised not surprised. He said, I thought that the Sounders played us without any fear. They really went at us. They really were aggressive. I talked to Wetzel, and he basically said, look, there was a point in time where we let them believe. And, it was kind of tough because we didn't really know them as a group. Everybody was very complimental about what the Sounders did. And both implied that there were moments that were difficult and they really pushed them back, and they had to kind of get out of that brief moment from the Sounders to really get going. And that alone, coming from all those guys, is an incredible praise because you're talking about a guy in Wetzel that played in with Belgium of the national teams, played for Dortmund. I mean, you could talk about everything that Koke has done, UEFA champion. Even Giuliano Simeone, he talked about how good and how difficult it was to play this team. So those are all things that you could kind of hang your hat on. Again, not about moral victory, but just about, hey, you know what, maybe we are better than at times we play like the potential. There are those lapses that's what kind of drives us crazy, right? Those lapses of moments that could have been so preventable. But I would say maybe not the perfect way as it usually is, but I had a coach that used to say sometimes we're outclassed, not outperformed. I feel like that's what happened to the Sounders, right? I mean, outclassed is because of the quality of players that were on that field, but outperformed not completely, right? There were moments and times where Seattle definitely controlled. They advanced the ball right. They got in the right positions. And maybe with our own talent, it might have made a difference. Jordan Morris maybe gets to more than one of those balls. He's a lot quicker to get to certain spots. Maybe
he definitely would have been able to stretch the field more. I think that's kind of what the one thing the Sounders have been missing in these two games is they've not gotten into transition really at all. Like they've done a good job of pressing. They've done a good job of passing between lines. They've done all the stuff that you want them to do, but they have not been able to get out on the break at all. And I think that is where you most feel Jordan Morris is there's just no threat of, the teams have been able to compress the field more than is ideal. And I think that speaks well of the Sounders' ability to still play through it. Like they did, Atletico is one of the best defensive teams in the world. The Sounders did not struggle to complete passes. They didn't struggle to break lines. They you could go through the metrics and honestly, the metrics look great for the most part. Other than the quality of the shots that they got into, the Sounders were equal or better than Atletico, down the list. And so I think that speaks well to them. And I just want to point out, this is if you had told me that the Sounders were going to start a Club World Cup game with Reed Baker Whiting at left back, with John Bell at left center back, with Jackson Reagan at right center back, and Kalani Kosarienzi, who was not even on a first team roster at the start of this season, and that they would not only start the game, but they would hold their own. And there were moments in this game where you actually thought they might get a result here. After Rusnak scored, I thought, they might be able to. No, it lasted 5 minutes. That hope only lasted about 5 minutes, but it was there. There was a moment where I was like, they might be able to pull off a result here. And I thought they actually after the third goal, I thought they looked like they were just as likely to score as Atletico was. So whatever. Maybe it's faint praise. I don't know. But I think the danger, to the degree that there's someone asked this in our Discord recently. They said, is there a danger the Sounders are going to be demoralized by this tournament? And I don't think that's the problem at all. I actually think they are going to come out of this tournament feeling really good about themselves. I think if there's a danger, it's that there's a letdown. Like, I think there's a possibility that they come out of this and they go back into league play and they're like, this just doesn't have the juice. Like this feels like it's coming on. Like, if anything, they're going to be coming down from a high, I think. And it'll be interesting to see how they do against PSG, because if they are able to stay competitive with PSG, I'm not even going to, whatever. I suppose stranger things have happened. They might be able to get off a win. But the reality is that I think they'd have to win 3-0 and for Botafogo to beat Atletico to advance out of this group. That does not seem plausible or realistic. So I don't need to dwell on that. But if they can be competitive in this game, and by competitive, I just mean in the last 20 minutes feeling like they have a chance at a result, I think that they're going to come out of this tournament feeling really good about themselves.
Go ahead, Tim.
I just was trying to think, because I don't know what the tiebreaker scenarios look like. It might take more than 3 goals, because I think.
Well, I think they would, in that scenario. My understanding is it would go from, because there would be 3 teams tied on 3 points in that scenario. The Sounders would be, I think, equal on goal difference if they won 3-0, and then it would go total goals scored in the whole tournament. And so if they were to win 3-0, they'd go through. If they were to lose 4, or if they were winning 4-1, though, they wouldn't go through. Again, these are relatively implausible scenarios.
I still stand by what I said yesterday, that the best chance for them going through is 2 other teams dropping out. But
I think it's fair.
Regardless, I think there's a lot for the Sounders to feel good about. I hope that whether they get a win, they play well against PSG, and if the risk of a drop off is there, the Sounders can bring their own juice. Like, I think if they come out of this tournament and they can roll together some results, they can keep getting healthy, I feel like Sounders fans want to be energized and excited to come to games. They have come to these games or watched them and had a good time, and the Sounders can keep playing well and playing exciting and take the momentum that they've gained from this, that, bravery and courage that Brian Schmetzer has talked about in how they've played, and feel like if we can hang tough against some of the legitimately best clubs in the world, we can beat anybody in MLS. And if they go into games with that attitude, if they bring the energy that they've had in their best moments against teams in this tournament, like, they absolutely can beat anybody. And if you start putting that product on the field and stacking up points at home, and like, people are going to come and watch games, and the stadium is going to be rocking. And I think they can build themselves up if there is a bit of a drop.
This is my concern, and I'm probably going to give an unpopular opinion here. But first of all, Botafogo beat PSG because Botafogo decided we're going to play in a mid to low block. We're not going to get out. We're not going to allow you to get in transition. We're going to overpopulate the midfield. We're not going to let Doué get into space. And we're going to basically bunker. And then they got one transition moment off of a midfield that ended up and resulted in an Igor de Jesus. Great pass. And they held on for dear life all the way to the end of the game. They had a couple of moments, but most of it was all PSG. So let's put that out there, because I don't see the Sounders necessarily going out there a bunker. I also don't advise it, because that's the way Botafogo play. They have a couple of huge, great center backs. They have some very good talented fullbacks. Not like Seattle don't have their own, players, but I don't know if it's going to translate exactly to a positive result against PSG. But the unpopular opinion is this one. How much are you willing to risk your top players in a game that might ultimately not mean anything, because you're already almost out of it? Your percentages of going through the next round are very little, are slim to none. Clearly you are out, matched in every other duel. how much do you risk Obed? How much do you risk Christian? How much do you, your wing play? Maybe, you got a lot more guys that haven't played a lot of minutes. But to me, Christian and Obed are so important in so many ways, not just like in how important they are moving forward, but Obed has, potentially a whole other future ahead of himself here soon. How much do you really expose them to a really difficult game after it was physical? They played 90. I mean, no, not both of them, because JP came on. But regardless of how much,
JP came on for Rusnak.
Oh, you're right. Oh, yeah, because he pushed us a 10.
Yeah,
Obed. Yeah. So there you go. So you played him in so many positions. You've kind of risked them a lot. I am fearful, and again, this is unpopular because nobody wants to hear the Sounders are going to play out with their B squad or with some rotational stuff against PSG. But to be simple, you got to protect players from themselves, and you got to think ahead of what's coming. So I don't know what you guys think about that. I said that in the post game with Aaron Levine, and he's like, "Yeah, casuals are not going to like that." And I know that they're not, right? Because you want to go see the best of the Seattle has against the best of PSG. But to me, it's a very difficult situation.
I just want to, before we get into this, I just want to point out, you casually mentioned that you were on Q13 with Aaron Levine yesterday. We should have led with that. This is the star quality that we bring to No Sadietas is Niko Moreno's being on TV. But no, I do think there's some value to what you're saying. I guess what I would counter that with, though, is I think the Sounders are in exactly the position that they probably thought they were going to be in, which is to say that effectively out of the tournament going into this PSG game, and that the PSG game is not necessarily about grinding out a result as much as it is making a case that you can do this. And so in that sense, I do want to see them put their best foot forward, because I think, I think I would be a little bit more sympathetic to maybe JP starts for Christian, and then or maybe JP comes on at halftime for Christian or something like that. Mm-hmm. Because I do think that's one of the ones where I'm a little bit more, but like Obed, I want to see Obed play against PSG. I think that's really that's about building up his value as much as anything else, because this is how you show, I think he showed against Atletico that he can hang, that he can play at that level. I think actually Reed Baker Whiting showed that he can play at that level too. Oh, yeah. And this is a little bit of a side, but I talked to Reed after the game, and what struck me about his demeanor was he was really frustrated at the mistakes that he thought he made on, I guess, the first two goals. I didn't immediately identify him as being at fault, but he felt like he did something wrong that didn't put himself in the best light. I also want to say, I thought he did great on the penalty that was called. I thought he defended that really well. I think it was justified that got taken away. First of all, I think if there was a foul, it was outside the box. But I also think there was a great case to be made that there was no foul. He was in a hand fight essentially with Giuliano Simeone, and so I just wanted to say that. But I do think I still want to see the Sounders. I don't know. I realize it's not entirely logical, but I would be bummed if they, I'm trying to think who else I would be okay with maybe sitting. I don't think you should push him onto the field, for instance. There's no, right. I think that's a good example of there's in a situation where this result really is potentially more meaningful. Maybe you do try to get something out of Kim. Jordan Morris, another one where I don't know. I suppose there's a world where he might be fit enough to start against PSG. I think
that'd be wild to me.
Yeah, no, I don't think. I think he's got to come off the bench again, or I would hope that he's fit enough to come off the bench in this one. Who else? But yeah, I think the wingers are going to rotate. However, I don't think there's too much danger there. But I want to see Rusnak start. I think I want to see Masovsky start at the 9. Although I could be convinced that Ferreira could do that role just as well. I think one thing I have been a little bit, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more Georgie in this series, or in this tournament, Georgie was able to do his thing against Atletico. I think he had some moments where they were really, they were positive moments. And I've been frankly a little disappointed in Ryan Kent. Here's a guy who's been in games like this, who's faced opponents like this. If not, like, he may have actually literally played Atletico. I don't know. I didn't go through it, but I would have liked to have seen a little bit more from him in both games. I don't think he has been effective in this tournament. I still think he was a good signing. I still like him, but this was kind of part of the reason you brought him in is in moments like these. And he has not really looked particularly like he's been like probably their fourth or fifth best winger, which is pretty not great,
I think not what you want to see when like Paul Rothrock is having significantly greater impact in both games than just about any of your other wingers. Like, I love Paul Rothrock as much, if not more, than most, but he is not a guy with Europa League final experience, or even if it's at youth levels, Argentine international team experience. Like, I think Ryan Kent has been the most disappointing of that bunch, but like Pedro de la Vega has also not, like, he's not been terrible, but he hasn't shown as much as he needs to. And maybe those experiences for those guys lead to a better performance against PSG, or coming out of the tournament feeling like they, need to make up for that letdown. But there have been guys who have impressed beyond what maybe would have been expected, if not hoped. I mean, I think, Obed and Reed in particular, the hope is pretty high. The expectation is not quite as high, but it's pretty high. And I think those guys have certainly exceeded expectations, but there are players on the opposite side of that coin as well.
Yeah, I want to get in on this because it is something that has been evident in this tournament as well, is that your top players haven't quite performed the way you want them. And I'll even say Albert, because in the first game, Albert wasn't good against Botafogo necessarily. I thought that he struggled. In this one, he gets the goal, but I mean, it's difficult, right? Because again, we're going to be outclassed. I thought Paul Rothrock, look, Llorente is not even a right back. Llorente is a midfielder that's mainly known for his attacking presence, right? He played for Real Madrid for the longest time, and the way he pocketed Paul was just crazy to me, because that's not his forte, and Paul is always going to give you problems, but he was very quiet, Paul Rothrock. He just could not get past this guy. So when a guy like Ryan Kent, that, as Jeremiah implied, he has the pedigree, that's the guy you would think that is going to come in and shine, and he doesn't. That's when things go even more bleak, and when you feel like you have no response. And that's where the Georgie shout is so good, because when Georgie came in, he came in hungry, baby. I mean, he came in like, I haven't gotten a minute, I need to show up. He immediately creates problems. He immediately gets that, ricocheting to Pereira. I mean, the whole thing about the way he approached the game is probably what you needed. And even Pedro de la Vega. I'm a big Pedro de la Vega guy. I have said time and time again that he does create a lot because he is so engaged. He is so active, but he just wasn't clinical, and his finishing product wasn't quite there in this one, in either game, I guess, because obviously he does create a spark in the Botafogo game, but once again, the whiff, the last shot at the end, he doesn't quite get it there. So the Sounders' top players just haven't quite performed to the top level, and that's going to be a problem no matter what. And if anything, I hope that turns for the rest of the year, because they're going to need every single one of those players to really shine if you're going to have a successful rest of the 2025 season.
Yeah, and I think if there's one more thing that I feel like is worth highlighting is I've been guilty of this as anyone was saying, sort of like when the people have been frustrated about the lack of signings going into this tournament. I've been among the people who have said something along the lines of, don't get caught up in signings for this tournament. I don't know how much of a difference that would have made anyway. Like, we aren't suddenly going to be on the same field as at the same level as PSG and Atletico because we made a number 9 signing, let's just say. I still think that's true, but I have to admit that if they had been able to bring in one impact player, it clearly would have made a difference in this. Like, I think they've been close enough that player could have made a difference. It wouldn't have suddenly made them better than Botafogo or Atletico, and certainly not PSG. But you can see how one moment of brilliance would have potentially changed both of those games. And we haven't gotten that. Like, the Sounders have done well to generate scoring chances and to score goals in each game and to be competitive and to be right there. But at no point did they have a player who just look at, like, I just did that. Like, I'm capable of doing the same things. And like, Atletico had 4 or 5 of those moments in that game yesterday where he was just like, yeah, the Sounders don't have anyone who can do that. That's just not a thing. And I think so that's a little bit of a disappointment, I think, is that I don't think we gave ourselves the best chance to succeed in this. And I think it speaks well of how well they've performed, that even without that sort of like extra boost that they were in these games. But I can't stop thinking that there's missed opportunities here. And I really hope that the takeaway that, Adrian Hanauer specifically about how to spend on this team is not like, well, look how competitive we were even without spending money. We should keep doing this. I hope the takeaway is, man, if I just spent a little bit more money, we could be this much more competitive. We can get to this level, or the gap is not so big that it's not even worth trying to bridge it. It's like, no, we can make moves. Let's up that budget. Let's look for a player who can be a difference maker. And hopefully that's I don't know how optimistic I am about that being the takeaway, but I would hope that's one of the takeaways.
I mean, I do think if they because they could have decided it was worth it in the winter and gone after you have to really spend, but you can find a genuine home run of a U22 signing out there if you're willing to make a good offer, bring the right amount of money. If they had, a U22 striker who has a profile closer to Jordan's than Musovski, maybe you have someone who's a real threat over the top. Because I think, to the point of Rusnak has not performed at the peak of his ability. I think some of that has been, there were moments in both games where he plays a through ball that just is too fast or too far ahead of Musovski, who does his damnedest to get there, but he just doesn't have the physical tools to end up on the end of that ball with space to get a shot off or, get on it before the keeper gets there or it goes out. You have a guy who can get there. A few of those at the very least turn into dangerous moments. And it's, similar to, well, what if the Sounders were healthy? If Jordan Morris hadn't picked up this injury that's kept him out for the vast majority of this season, but those things happened. Yeah. I really hope that the takeaway from ownership is we are that close to being not just able to hang, but really compete for results in this sort of competition. If we add that kind of talent, we can win the league. We can go to CCC. We can win that tournament again, and we can be back here with another shot at these teams. If that's your goal, then you have to spend to get there.
But I wasn't going to do it, but I'm going to do it because you guys are really hitting some really good points, and I'm just going to go out here and say it. Look, people have this huge misconception about the job that Jeremiah and I have done during podcasts and Sandra Hart in general about how, the Sounders have built a good roster with what they have, and that the proof is in the pudding. Look where they are. Look where they have been in terms of the league. Look what they've been able to perform in this Club World Cup. It is evident that there is a good starting core and enough of a good roster to be competitive. But Jeremiah and I have never said, and I don't think anybody is under our heart, that this team could not get any better if you were not to inject more money and bring in players of a higher caliber, because that would be wrong. Everything that we have talked about, the way this was built, bringing in Ferreira, keeping Albert Rusnak, Jordan Morris DP, all of these things have one thing in common, and it is that the Sounders ownership was never gonna move on from these players and go spend twice or three times the amount for these players in order to bring that sort of talent. You're not gonna tell Albert Rusnak, hey man, pack your bags, we're not gonna give you 3 when if I'm going to replace you, I'm going to have to spend 10 plus salary to bring in a guy that's going to do what you did last season, right? So that is the reality of it. The misconception is not that we are content with what it is that we appreciate the job that was done to build a roster that could certainly be better, but we are not living in La La Land, and we're not playing in the realm of make-believe like so many of these other podcasters and people and analysts that talk about, oh, well, why don't we go out there and get Holland or Lucho Diaz? Like, come back to reality and just realize that that's just never going to happen. Or even below that, the Sounders were looking at Igor De Jesus at one point. They talked about Igor De Jesus. They wanted him in. He's going to Nottingham Forest for $20 million. Do you really think the Sounders are going to spend $20 million on Igor De Jesus? I would love to. I do that on FIFA in my PS5. Hell yeah. I'll bring that guy in all day, every day. But the reality is that that's not what's happening. Same thing happened with Kevin Denke, right? I mean, the Sounders were following him. They wanted him. He went for a whole bunch of money to Cincinnati. In this transfer window, I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys, and I haven't told this to anybody, the Sounders have made multiple offers to players, the U22 that they wanted, and they have not been able to come out with anything. I made some calls. There was one that was never offer made. There was another one that was like, yeah, they got outbid. So all this to say is that the club wants to get better. The club knows and understands the holes that they have in up top precisely, but they don't have the budget to compete in today's day and age. And to kind of conclude the whole thing, because you guys mentioned this, we've said it from the very beginning. This team doesn't have a guy that's gonna take over a game. That a guy that for sure what's gonna turn it on. The Nikos, the Rauls, the Dempseys, the Albafemi Martins. That guy that you knew that it didn't matter what, he's gonna turn it on. I mean, it's not about when, it's just maybe right now. Right, the Sounders just don't have that player. They have a lot of really good players, but they don't have that X factor that's going to take over a game, and that's something that is going to be missing moving forward if the Sounders continue to not spend. Because in today's day and age, and me and Jeremiah talked about this off camera, if you want to go get a Niko that you paid 10 for 10 years ago, 6 years ago, 8 years ago, you're going to pay 20 if you want that. For that kind of player, that sort of trajectory, that sort of proven commodity, you're going to have to go and pay. And that's why you go look for Pedro at $7 million to try to see if you can get something out of a player that has all these qualities, and you're hoping that it comes up, but you're really going and buying your players on the cheap side to hope that they have great potential. And sometimes that works, but a lot of times it doesn't. If you want sure talent, you got to spend, and I just don't see this team doing it right now.
I certainly do not mean to suggest that it's like easy for them to go out and buy a guy who's going to fit as a U22 with all of the various restrictions. And I don't think that that's what you thought, but I know, occasionally I will write these pieces for Sounder at Heart that are like, the Sounders are presumably looking for this type of player. Here are guys that could possibly fit that. And every time someone is in the comments going, well, why are you putting these restrictions on what type of player or how much they're going to spend. And I don't know if you do this, Niko, but anytime I'm like looking at players and I come across a guy who I really like, the Sounders don't sign him, but I keep paying attention to him. And time again, a guy who, I'm doing my best guesswork based on like rumors that are out there, transfer market valuations and stuff. And guys who are in this like late teens, early 20s age range, they might be listed as, oh, this is a $3 million player. Great. Why don't the Sounders get him? Because a team that's in the Europa League or Champions League places in one of the big 5 leagues is going to come and drop 10 million on that player with the promise of you're going to come and maybe you're not a starter right away, but you're going to play Champions League. You're going to play Europa League. You're going to work your way into your national team. It is so much harder to sign these guys than I think most people realize unless they are spending a lot of time looking at it, because, it used to, I was listening to a podcast focused on European football earlier today, and they were talking about the shift in like the European market, that it used to be that young South American players would kind of come through Portugal a lot of the time, that Portuguese teams would come, and Porto and Benfica and Sporting are swooping up Argentine and Brazilian and Colombian talent. And that's how, Luis Diaz gets to Liverpool by going through Portugal to get there. Like, and now that's just not the way it goes that way sometimes, but Man City and Real Madrid and all of these major teams are doing their shopping directly from Argentina and Brazil and Uruguay. Like, the middleman is getting cut out. And because those teams are shopping and they have the money to just say, sure, we'll drop $45 on a teenager or $45 million on a teen from River Plate. Like, Sounders aren't ever competing with that. You keep going down and down, and you're getting into much less proven, much lower ceiling, much lower floor players that fit into the range of, okay, maybe we can spend $3 million and maybe fit their salary cap hit into the confines for a U22 player. Like, it's so much that you have to manage, and that player probably still is fielding offers from Europe.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This is going to be an interesting summer transfer window, in part because of this, but in part because I think there's been a light sort of shined on the Sounders here. And I think, again, maybe this is me being hopelessly optimistic, and maybe that's the problem, is that we are too optimistic about what might happen. But I do think there is some reason to hope that this has maybe opened some eyes about, like, let's get back to this thing. Let's and I think there has to be a knowledge that part of why the Sounders won Champions League, part of the reason they're in this tournament is because when they had the opportunity to spend 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, they went out and they bought Niko Ladera. They went out and they bought the Liga MX Golden Boot winner. And it's players like that got them into this position. And they probably need players like that if they're to get back to this position. Like, the Sounders are a good team. Like, this team could win MLS Cup. I don't see any reason that couldn't happen, but they need breaks to go their way. And I think they're going to have a hard time competing. We saw it this year. They got smashed by Cruz Azul, who went on obviously to win Champions League, but that shows the gap between where the Sounders are right now and where they would need to be to get to this place again. And the way you bridge that gap primarily is by finding top end talent. And the only way you're going to find top end talent is to spend money. So hopefully that is a message that is received. Hopefully that changes some calculations about how the Sounders are going to go about spending money. And right now, the best way they can spend is on that U22 spot. I do think that there's probably a ceiling that you want to place on that. You don't want to, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to go out and spend 8-10 million on a player who is making like less than $1 million. That's just not necessarily like the right kind of investment. But why not go spend 3 to 5 million and find a potential contributor, even if it's not this year, but someone who has a high upside. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But anything else that you guys want to close out with before we get out of here?
Well, in the sense of everything that we just said, I almost feel silly bringing this up because the Sounders are not looking at a big player. We kind of teased, or I was looking into a specific young 20-year-old forward from Colombia that I thought maybe could be a possibility for the Sounders. But then I did preface it by saying, I don't know if it's a Tacoma Defiance player because he doesn't really have the trajectory to be a Sounders player necessarily right now. And apparently he is here. His name is Carlos Gutierrez. He's a forward coming out of the B Team Nacional, kind of the not first division of Nacional. He's had some European spells. He is a explosive, good on the air, good shot, well regarded in senses of a youth player, of course, as a prospect that could potentially be an interesting signing for Tacoma Defiance. So he is in town. I have seen him a couple of times at Starfire. I'm pretty sure I saw him at the Botafogo game. So just something to look at, not what you guys want to hear for sure. And if this makes anything better, the Sounders had been looking at a Serie A Italian league forward that they were unable to also cash in on. So the team is trying. I'm hoping that they can do it in the summer window, but I'm starting to get very nervous that what Jeremiah just said, they're looking for a guy that's going to come in and perform. It's going to come in and be a difference maker. But if you don't have the budget to get that sort of player, then I don't know what you do. Do you just bring somebody that you're settling for? Do you not bring anybody and hear it from everybody? I don't know. I'm starting to get a little apprehensive on whether or not they're going to be able to do it. I would bet that they do, but I'm starting to, my confidence level has definitely dropped.
Love to hear that, right?
Yeah, you love to hear that right up there. Everything we just said, yeah.
Yeah.
And again, this is just for people that, usually you go after Craig Weibel and you're like, why aren't we scouting the same way? Look, none of that has changed. The scouting's the same. Sean Henderson's a brilliant beast when it comes to his job. And Craig has a tough job because he's going out there sitting on the table with his, he's not a tie guy. So I'm guessing he has a hoodie like mine and he's just sitting there trying to, negotiate and, everybody's got portfolios and he has his wallet. I don't know. It's a difficult job when it comes to global soccer. Like Tim, you put it perfectly. When it comes to how everything's shifting, just you got to get out there and be able to spend some money.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's on as we tend to do on this show. We led the end on high positive notes. Tim, thanks for joining us. You can, of course, read Tim on Sounder at Heart. Of course, Niko is a regular feature on this show. We are going to hopefully be back. I think the plan is next week we're going to be back into more of our regular cadence of programming. But Niko, thank you again for doing this. You can, of course, follow him on Pulso Sports. You can see him on Lobbing Scorchers. Apparently, you can see him on Q13 semi-regularly these days. And of course, you can follow him on Blue Sky El Rolo NW. Tim is Tim. What is your Blue Sky?
I think it's Tim Ostland Foss.
It's a hard one to search for. I got to admit to you.
That's that's on me. Tim OSTLUND FOSS. No hyphens or dashes or anything in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm around.
All right.
People are finding me, whether that's a good choice on their part or not.
I love Tim. Tim's always on point, man. I enjoy your work for sure, Tim.
Appreciate that.
Well, on that note, we should probably get out of here. Thank you to, of course, our sponsor. That's Marnie O'Shan Homes. If you had forgotten about that, so go check her out if you need to buy a house. I can highly recommend that. And with that said, I'm Jeremiah Shan signing off for Tim Foss, Niko Moreno, and of course our producer Lickett. This is No Sadietes, part of the Sounder at Heart podcast network, and we will catch you next time.
I expect a LAFC who's motivated to prove themselves at home, to prove to their fans that they're capable of winning in this league. And it's up to us to really brew in the party.
I feel a lot better than Bob.